She spent years telling the world she would never do it. She said it out loud, in interviews on television, with full confidence. Getting a facelift? Not her. Never. She wore that decision like a badge of honor, proof that she was different, that she wasn't going to chase youth or bow down to Hollywood's impossible standards. And people respected her for it. Then, at 64 years old, Rosie O'Donnell got a facelift anyway. And the most shocking part? Almost nobody even noticed. But before we get to that, let's talk about who Rosie O'Donnell actually is. Because if you don't know her full story, you're missing everything that makes this moment so complicated, so human, and so hard to look away from. Rosie O'Donnell didn't just become famous. She became a symbol. A loud, unapologetic, take-no-prisoners woman who refused to play by Hollywood's rules. She hosted one of the most-watched daytime talk shows in American history. She was a comedian, an actress, a mother, an activist, someone who said what she meant and meant what she said, even when it cost her. And for a long time, one of the things she said most clearly was this: she would not get plastic surgery. She specifically named Geraldine Page and Colleen Dewhurst, two legendary actresses known for their raw, unfiltered performances and their refusal to disappear as they got older. That was the path Rosie had chosen for herself. Age naturally. Look your age. Let the craft speak louder than the appearance. And here's the thing, it was working. She said so herself. As she got closer to 60, the acting offers started coming in. The kinds of roles she had always wanted. Substantial, complex, older woman roles that Hollywood rarely gives to women who haven't surgically preserved themselves. Her strategy was paying off. Her face, the natural, unaltered, aging face, was becoming an asset. So, why would she ever change that? The answer starts with a number. 50. Rosie O'Donnell lost 50 pounds. And while that sounds like a victory, and in many ways it was, it also started a chain reaction she wasn't fully prepared for. Weight loss at any age changes the way your body looks. But when you lose a significant amount of weight in your 60s, the effects on your face can be dramatic. The fat that once filled out your cheeks, your jawline, your neck, it disappears. And what's left behind isn't always what you expected. Skin that had been supported by volume for decades suddenly has nothing holding it up. Rosie had spent years making peace with the way she looked. She had done the internal work. She had the philosophy. She had the feminist framework. She had the career strategy. And then her body changed in a way she hadn't planned for, and suddenly the mirror was showing her something different than the face she had made peace with. She started researching facelifts. Let's slow down here because this is the part of the story that most coverage glosses over, and it's actually the most important part. Rosie didn't just quietly decide to get a facelift and move on. She went through what she herself described as a full existential feminist crisis. And she wasn't being dramatic. She meant it literally. She thought of it as a betrayal, not just of herself, but of something bigger. Of feminism. Of the aging process. Of every woman who had ever felt pressured to look younger and chose not to give in. That's a heavy thing to carry into a surgeon's consultation room. And yet, she kept circling back to that same uncomfortable thought. The idea that her resistance to change had stopped being genuine and started being performative. That she was holding on to a position not because it still reflected how she truly felt, but because it had become part of her public identity, and changing would mean admitting that even she, the woman who said never, had limits. There's a point where acceptance starts to feel like lying. She wrote that about her own reflection, about looking in the mirror and feeling like she was pretending something was fine when it wasn't. And that honesty, the willingness to say, I told you all one thing, and now I feel something different, is rare, especially for someone with her platform and her history. She wasn't abandoning her values. She was expanding them. Or at least, that's what she was trying to figure out. And it wasn't clean or simple or resolved overnight. It was messy and uncomfortable and very, very human. Clay O'Donnell is 13 years old. She's the youngest of Rosie's 5 children, the one Rosie calls the caboose, the last chapter of motherhood before the house gets quiet. And when Clay found out her mother was considering a facelift, she did not hold back. She pushed back.
hard.
And the way Rosie described Clay's reaction is one of the most striking things in the entire essay. She said Clay sounded exactly like me. Like her younger self, more certain, more morally rigid, more sure of where the lines were, had somehow moved into her house and was now sitting across from her at the kitchen table, making all the arguments Rosie herself used to make. Think about what that moment must have felt like. You're already in the middle of an internal war with yourself. You're questioning something you've believed for years. You're trying to figure out who you are now versus who you said you'd always be. And then your 13-year-old daughter looks at you and reflects your own former certainty right back at you. But she didn't. Instead, she did something that's harder than either giving in or standing firm. She used the moment as a lesson. For Clay, yes, but also for herself. She said she wants her children to grow up in a world where they don't feel like they have to change. But also, and this is the key part, where they know they can change if they want to without losing their moral standing in their own lives. Clay didn't say a word after that. At least, not about the surgery. So she went ahead with it. Facelift. Neck work. The full procedure. And she was not quiet about the cost. She wrote that it cost her more money than she had ever paid for a car. For someone who has been open about financial struggles in the past, that's not a small thing to admit. It was a significant investment made with full awareness of what it meant. She was specific about what she was addressing, the lower face and neck, the areas where the weight loss had left the most visible changes. She wasn't trying to look 30 again. She wasn't trying to erase the evidence of her life. She was trying to feel comfortable in the face that she saw in the mirror every day. And once it was done, she didn't hide it. She posted unfiltered before and after photos on Instagram. No soft lighting, no strategic angles, no filters smoothing over the details. Just the before and the after, side by side, exactly as they were. That kind of transparency is unusual in an industry where cosmetic procedures are often the world's worst-kept secret. Everyone assumes, nobody confirms, and the whole thing stays in this uncomfortable in-between space where honesty is the exception. Rosie put it all out there. The photos, the essay, the internal conflict, the price tag, the daughter's reaction, all of it. And then she waited to see what people would say. Here's where the story takes a turn that's almost funny, if you let yourself see it that way. Nobody said anything. Not a single person. Not her friends, who presumably saw her regularly and would have noticed a change. Not strangers on the street. Not even people who, as she put it, owe her compliments. The people in her life who would have had every reason to say you look different, you look great, did you do something? They said nothing. And her daughter Clay, the same 13-year-old who had argued against the surgery with the moral certainty of a young Rosie O'Donnell, also said nothing. Not a word. No acknowledgement. No reaction. Nothing. Rosie's description of this in her essay is genuinely funny and genuinely poignant at the same time. She had gone through all of it. The research, the internal crisis, the feminist reckoning, the conversation with her daughter, the decision, the surgery, the recovery, the photos, the public essay. And the result? Zippo. That's the word she used. Zippo. Nobody noticed, or if they did, nobody said so. After everything she had put herself through, the emotional weight of betraying a position she'd held for decades, the physical reality of surgery and recovery, the vulnerability of posting unfiltered photos online, the world just kept moving. There's something almost liberating about that. And something almost absurd about it, too. Because it raises a question that sits underneath the whole story. How much of the pressure women feel to stay the same, or to change, is actually coming from the outside, and how much of it is something they're carrying entirely on their own? Rosie O'Donnell is not naive. She knows exactly what she's doing by sharing this story publicly. She's not just talking about a facelift. She's talking about something much bigger. She's talking about the impossible position women are put in when it comes to aging. If you don't get work done, you're letting yourself go. If you do get work done, you're betraying yourself or giving in to the patriarchy. There is no version of aging as a woman in public life that doesn't come with someone else's opinion about what you should have done differently. The criticism comes from every direction, and it contradicts itself constantly. Rosie lived that contradiction out loud. She spent years on one side of it, firmly, publicly, in interviews, and then she found herself crossing to the other side, and she refused to pretend it hadn't happened. She refused to sneak the procedure quietly and deny it when asked. She refused to let it stay in the shadows where so many of these decisions live. Instead, she wrote an essay about it. She posted the photos. She named the internal war she went through. She talked about her daughter. She talked about feminism. She talked about what it means to change your mind, when changing your mind means admitting publicly that you were wrong about something you said very loudly. She called this stage of her life Act 3. 64 years old. 50 pounds lighter. A new lower face and neck. 5 kids, the youngest about to finish her last day of school. And she's just happy to be here. That's what she wrote. Happy to be alive. Able to feel and choose and use her voice whenever she feels called to. For the girl she was. The woman she is. That's not a small thing to say. That's a woman who has been through a great deal. Health scares, public feuds, personal losses, years of criticism from every corner, standing at 64 and saying, I'm still here, I'm still choosing, and I'm still going to tell you exactly what I did and why. So, what's the actual takeaway here? It's easy to frame this as a celebrity getting cosmetic surgery. That's the headline version. Woman who said she'd never get a facelift gets a facelift. Story over. But that's not really the story. The real story is about what happens when the identity you've built, the public version of yourself that people know and respond to and expect you to stay consistent with, starts to feel like a cage. When the position you took becomes more about maintaining your image than about what you actually believe. Rosie could have gotten the surgery quietly. Plenty of people in her position do exactly that. She could have avoided the whole conversation. She could have posted a photo and let people wonder. She could have denied it entirely, the way some people do, even when the evidence is right there on their face. She chose not to do any of that. She chose to be uncomfortable in public. She chose to name the contradiction. I said I would never, and then I did. She chose to talk about her daughter's reaction and what it meant. She chose to describe the price, the crisis, the recovery, the Zippo response that followed. Because the conversation is worth having. Because women deserve to talk honestly about aging and choice and identity without being judged for landing somewhere unexpected. Because changing your mind, even about something you said loudly and clearly for years, is not weakness. It's growth. It's the very thing she wants her children to understand. At 64, with a new face and an old voice, Rosie O'Donnell is still doing the same thing she's always done, saying the quiet part out loud, refusing to pretend, and daring you to have an opinion about it. The question she leaves us with isn't really about facelifts at all. It's about what we actually owe ourselves, and whether the woman we are today has the right to disagree with the woman we used to be.